if you could also talk about food addictions and what foods are the most addictive and why do we develop food addictions?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Some people used to think, and I think many people still think, that only some people are food addicted, that it comes from a bad childhood. And so as a result, you're drawn to sugar to try to make up for the inner pain that you have. Well, maybe. But there are industries out there making foods that will addict anybody. It's like, to get addicted to cocaine or crack or heroin, do you have to have a bad childhood? No. These foods would addict anybody because you have the brain chemistry that allows addiction to occur. So who are these companies? Well, first one is really obvious. It's sugar, for example. Now, I'm not saying sugar is poison, as we were talking about earlier. Sugar is the body's main fuel. However, when you have sugar in an apple or an orange, you get the natural sugars that your body can absorb. But when people started taking sugar cane and sugar beets and throwing away all the pulp and fiber and extracting the sugar, so it's pure sugar, and then they put it into beverage, it may be called Dr. Pepper, but it's still not healthy. And you can get hooked on that. Sugar in the brain triggers the release of opiates and dopamine so that you get a little pleasure chemical and people get hooked on that. I'm not saying sugar is necessarily poisonous. 1 teaspoon of sugar here or there, who cares? But so much of it is dissolved into foods that you can end up getting a whole lot of calories you don't need. Chocolate can be addicting. I don't need to tell anybody listening to this. It's not only got sugar in it, but it has caffeine, it has theobromine, which is a stimulant. But I honestly think the most addictive food that I see people get hooked on is cheese. And cheese is an interesting thing. It has opiates in it. They're in the casein protein. They're called casomorphins, casein-derived morphine-like compounds, and they stimulate the very same brain receptors that morphine or heroin would stimulate. And I think it's the reason why cheese, a lot of people say, I could be vegan except for cheese. Meat is a little bit that way, but I think not as much as cheese. And that's kind of about it. You could get hooked on salty foods as well, but nobody ever binged on strawberries or apples or oranges or pears. You had 1 or 2 and you thought, this is delicious, but you stopped. Nobody ever ate 25 apples, but so many people, they eat a cookie or they get the cheese wedge and the crackers, and before they know it, they've overdone it. They've had hundreds of calories they didn't intend to get, and that's the driving force of what I'm going to call food addiction. It's not a moral failing. It's just a biological phenomenon that every single person is vulnerable to.
Right. And those foods, like the processed foods and the cheese, they're calorie dense, but they're nutrient deficient. So in a way, could it also be, aside from the dopamine effect and the opiate effect, that, the body is looking for its right fuel, but we're giving it this inadequate nutrient deficient fuel, so it doesn't signal the satiety receptors. So you've got this pleasure thing going on, saying, oh, great, this is lovely. But then other parts of your body are saying, I didn't get enough. Could that be?
It's an interesting thing. I think that there are times where the body is seeking specific nutrients. And people who eat meat and cheese, although they're getting a lot of protein, are deficient in lots of other stuff. Meat doesn't have any vitamin C at all. It doesn't have any fiber at all. And it's a really lopsided food. And cheese, as you mentioned earlier, it's 70% fat, mostly saturated fat. So it's a terrible food nutrient-wise. And the dairy industry is fond of saying that milk products have calcium and they have phosphorus and da-da-da. But they're horrible. In my view, these are awful foods from a nutrient standpoint because they don't have what vegetables have, and what fruits have, and what whole grains and beans have. And if you throw out the dairy and the meat completely, and you build your diet from whole grains, beans, vegetables, and fruits, you're going to get the nutrition that you need. You still, however, can get hooked on things. The cheese will still call your name every now and then, or sugary foods and stuff like that. So you want to be careful about those things too.
Yeah. When people change their diet and they start eating whole plant-based foods, a lot of times when they begin, especially if they've been eating like the standard American diet, they think this food tastes horrible or it has no taste at all. Could you talk a little bit about that and if that would ever change, if the food would start to taste good?
Yeah, or I have to say, in my experience, it's just the opposite. I love the foods that I eat now, and they're completely vegan and plant-based. And maybe that's because of my deficient upbringing. I have to tell you, I grew up in North Dakota, and every day it was roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn. Or on a special occasion, roast beef, baked potatoes, and peas, you know, or maybe a pork chop instead of the roast beef. It was, I mean, this was not the pinnacle of culinary art, let me tell you. And that's what we ate day after day after day. And now on a vegan diet, here I live in Washington, D.C. There's a fabulous Italian restaurant down the block. They will make angel hair pasta, top it with an arrabbiata sauce. They'll make you grilled asparagus on the side, beautiful salads and side vegetables. There's an Indian restaurant across the street, which will make the most exquisite, like, curry dishes. They're all completely plant-based, but delicious. They're made from lentils and spinach and so forth. Chinese restaurants where they make rice and tofu and vegetables into wonderful things. Sushi restaurants. I'm not talking about fish sushi, but vegetable sushi. Ethiopian restaurants, Thai restaurants, Vietnamese foods. Many of them are completely plant-based. And if you said, no, Neal, you can't have any of that anymore, you got to go back to your roast beef, baked potatoes, and corn. What are you talking about? That's not like living to me.
Yeah.
Now I have to say, some people, if they go vegan and at the same time go really low salt, your tastes are set for a certain sodium intake, and when you drop down, its taste will take. Foods will be kind of bland until you get accommodated to that. So you can take that kind of slowly if you want to. And if you're first going vegan, you might just leave salt where it is for a while. And no, I think the tastes of vegan foods are very good to me.
Yeah, I suppose people who are like, say, with high blood pressure medications, or they're told to go on a low salt, low sodium diet. One of the great tips that I came across was, you know, just add the salt at the table, like don't cook with it. And a lot of the issues with the sodium is actually getting foods that contain a lot of salt already, like Parmesan cheese and even chicken is injected with salt water to bulk up its weight. So you could still, if you're switching and you want a little flavor, I suppose, sprinkle on some salt before you eat something, and that would be okay.
I think that's good advice because you're not using it in cooking, so it's not impregnating the food. But you mentioned cheese. A lot of people have no idea that cheese is one of the highest sodium foods among common foods. Take 2 ounces of potato chips. Very salty food, 330 milligrams of sodium in typical 2-ounce serving of potato chips. Take 2 ounces of a typical cheese. If it's cheddar, it's about 350. If it's Edam, it's 500. 2 ounces of Velveeta, 800 milligrams of sodium. I always say if it was any worse, it would be Vaseline. You know, it's fatty, gooey, salty junk. And it's marketed as a source of protein or something like that. It's basically just this fatty, salty goo. So I hope I'm cheering everyone up who's listening to this.
Well, I think it's cool. One of the things that I came across was, like, in terms of the taste buds, well, I found myself, because I have a background like yours with the food that I grew up on, when I started eating plant-based, I was excited. My body loved it, and I loved the flavors. And of course, the world cuisines are so easily plant-based. But for some people, like, they eat a lot of fast food, and their taste buds, there's this neural adaptation, I guess. Like Dr. Doug Lisle and Dr. Alan Goldhammer wrote in The Pleasure Trap that when you eat those foods all the time, your taste buds have adjusted for high amounts of salt, fat, and sugar. And then maybe it'll take 2 weeks or something. But with the patients you've worked with, have you found that most cases they enjoy the food right from the start, or it takes a little adjustment period?
Yeah, I mean, they find things right away. Now keep in mind, I encourage our participants to experiment. So if they have never made a vegan lasagna or something like that, I say, let's give it a try. And once in a while, they'll have a dud where they make some recipe and it didn't work out right. But that's good. You know, that's what experimenting is all about. You got to try different things. You know, I never made hummus before. Let me try making it. Or I never drank almond milk. I never splashed oat milk on my cereal. Is it any good? So I encourage people to try these things. If every day they've been having pork sausage, go to the store and get the vegan sausage or the veggie bacon or the veggie hot dog. Try it. So once in a while, there'll be things that aren't their cup of tea. Other times, and much more often, people are excited. We just finished a study here, 16 weeks, and we've done this with thousands of people in various studies, but we just finished one. People have been coming here every week into our center every once a week in the evening, and they share around recipes and websites and new products, and it is the most exciting adventure you can imagine. Because they come here because they're overweight, or they got diabetes, or they got high cholesterol, or they got migraines, or their joints are killing them with arthritis, and they discover that you can feel healthier again. And you're finding new foods that are like medicine for you, but it tastes good, and your whole family's getting healthy at the same time. And it's the funnest thing. And you compare that with, no, just come to our clinic and swallow this pill.
Right, yeah.
Wait, what's that about? So anyhow, no, but people love it, you know, and to this day, you'll go to different restaurants and you'll find some that are better, some that are not as good. Have at it. The world is out there for you to explore. And when you find the things that you really like, keep it for yourself, and then share the knowledge with other people. Let other people know on social media, or let your friends know about the latest recipe, the latest website, the latest new food product you found. Let's make some noise.
Yeah, and one of the things I didn't mention with the diet, the low-fat vegan diet that you've looked into for type 2 diabetes, is that the people can eat that ad libitum. They can eat as much as they want. And I think one of the wonderful things for me doing that was you can eat as much as you want without worrying about putting on weight or feeling ill or lethargic, because these are the foods that are giving you the energy that you need. So you don't have to worry like, I'm having too much oil, or I'm having too much meat. And a lot of people think carbohydrates are putting the weight on for them.
Right.
But,
if you're following a healthy, low-fat vegan diet, and don't take the bottle of olive oil and go glug, 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 glug. You don't want stuff drowning in grease, you know, but a healthy vegan diet, minimal oils. What happens is these foods are naturally low in calories and high in fiber, that tricks the brain into saying, okay, I had enough food, I'm really satisfied. If you measure it, people are actually eating a couple of hundred calories a day less than before. Whereas if you're eating cheese or meat, there's no fiber in there to trigger that satiety phenomenon. So people tend to if you have pizza and whatnot, drowning in fat, in fatty cheese, it's really easy to overdo it on calories.
And just going back to like the mechanisms for food addiction, I have a couple of theories, and maybe you could tell me if they might have any possibility. But one of my theories that I've sort of feel is a key factor in food addictions, or people being hostile to the idea of changing their diet, is what the foods that we eat create the microbiome, all these microorganisms that are in our body, and they'll feed on whatever we provide them. So when people are eating meat and cheese and processed foods, we create a microbiome that feeds off of that, and that really likes that. And I know that there are a lot of neurotransmitters connected to our gut. So one of the things that I feel like is that when people, even if they just think themselves, there's this momentary thought, oh, I should give up cheese, or I should give up dairy products. And then all of a sudden there's this immediate thought of, no, don't do that. Really don't do that. And then if somebody mentions it to them, there's like, well, how could I possibly? It's almost on the one hand, I think it's because we're nutrient deficient and the body's struggling to get what it needs already. But on the other hand, there's this community of microbes that are living in us and they're thriving on this food. And when you stop eating that food, then you're going to create an entirely new microbiome. But I don't know if that has any basis, really. It's just a theory.
Well, the microbiome does change, and it changes quickly, and it changes quite dramatically. There was a research study done a few years ago where researchers they had a group of men from rural South Africa who were eating mostly a plant-based diet, and a group of men in mid-Atlantic region of the United States. And they asked them for a couple of weeks to switch diets. And the men in Africa had a very healthy microbiome, which quickly degraded to the extent that they started eating fried chicken and cheese and so forth. And the men in the mid-Atlantic part of the United States, as they adopted a more plant-based diet, their microbiome changed as well to a much more healthy pattern. So this will happen very, very rapidly. And the way I think of it is, you can have different seeds in your garden, but different seeds thrive in different kind of soil. A cactus will thrive in a certain kind of soil. Roses thrive in a different kind of soil. And the kind of soil that you put down allows different plants to grow. So now the soil I'm really thinking of is what I'm eating. So if I'm sending into my digestive tract a lot of meat and cheese and chicken and stuff, different kinds of bacteria thrive in that. Whereas if it's plant-based foods, it's a much healthier pattern.
Right. And the other theory that I have for you also kind of connects to the type 2 diabetes, where, it's type 2 diabetes can be seen as a survival mechanism, letting your body know. It develops insulin resistance to say, like, look, there's too much fat in me, too much fat in my muscle cells. And I've been looking and wondering about anorexia and bulimia and some eating disorders. And I believe there is a psychological part to it, but at the same time, I think that there could be a physiological part where the body knows that the food that it's eating, it feels like there is too much fat in the body. It may not look like you're fat, but there's some part of it that knows. So then you develop, this poor relationship with your food because you are eating like meat and dairy and processed foods. And that's all the food that that everybody's eating. But there's part of you that doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel good. It feels fat. It feels like, stop. So when you look in the mirror, you see somebody who's, overweight, even if you're very slim or if you are overweight, but something's wrong and you just can't figure out what it is. I don't know if you know of anything relating to that.
Well, back in the 1970s, I'm going to say, in the 1980s, there were all kinds of treatments for anorexia. And some of them were, I think, really quite punishing. The idea was that you should be eating everything. And a lot of kids it was particularly kids, typical case would be, a 12 or 14-year-old girl, 16-year-old girl. Often they found meat repulsive and they didn't want to eat meat. And there would be these huge power struggles where the kid would either be forced to eat meat or they would be hospitalized. They wouldn't be able to have any visitors unless they ate meat or gained weight. And you think, wait, stop. Let the child eat healthy foods that they're not afraid of, like fruits and vegetables and grains and beans, and throw out the meat and the cheese. And I honestly think that if every kid was raised on a healthy, completely plant-based diet, that the likelihood of anorexia would be much less, if for no other reason, because when kids are raised with cheese and meat, a fair number of them really do gain weight. And they do freak out because they're not really heavy, but they might be 10 pounds overweight, and they think this is terrible, and they don't know what to do. They don't know to make just a qualitative shift. They think, I got to starve. I got to not eat anything. And food becomes a toxic thing. Say, let's not go down that road. Let's allow kids to have healthy foods that will help them to maintain a healthy body weight naturally. And I think we will prevent a lot of anorexia. And for those people treating anorexia, good heavens, let the kids be vegan, or adults, as the case may be. Don't push them to eat meat, and don't get this ridiculous idea that a vegan diet will cause anorexia. There was actually a number of years ago misinterpreted findings that a lot of kids had a tendency toward veganism who happened to be anorexic. It was because it was such a big turnoff. It wasn't that a vegan diet caused the anorexia. It was once they had anorexia, they did not want the animal products anymore because they'd freak them out.
Yeah, yeah, and I think another attraction too is, and one of the reasons why a whole food plant-based diet is so beneficial is that it's very low in calories, just naturally low in calories.
Yeah, you'll get the calories you need.
Yeah,
it allows the process of homeostasis to work. I need more calories, I can eat them, the fiber satisfies me, I stop eating. It's like breathing. I need oxygen, I breathe more, I get the oxygen, I don't breathe so fast. You breathe at the normal rate. If you introduce animal products or other foods, even overly refined foods, you can defeat the homeostatic mechanism. So you're getting too many calories without the feedback that says, okay, I should stop now.
Right, yeah.
Like, you can cram a lot of calories in a small space.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the other thing there too is one thing I noticed myself was I don't have any food cravings now that I'm completely whole food plant-based, which is, it is an amazing thing because you know when your energy is low and then you eat, but you're not craving like chocolate, or you're not craving having, going to McDonald's or something like that. So you have this freedom to think about other things.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting back to a much more like what nature had in mind for you, as opposed to getting bounced around with various kinds of addictive things and cravings.
Yeah. So just to sum that up.